Take a look at your screen right now as Israel says it has killed more than 250 Hezbollah terrorist operatives during its limited ground operation in southern Lebanon. This is a post from the Israel Defense Forces as they say over the last 4 days, the IDF has eliminated more than 2,000 military targets and 250 Hezbollah terrorists. I do want to pop up one of the live images that we do have right here on your screen. This is a live look over Beirut, Lebanon, as that ground operation does continue. Now, still, Iran's supreme leader says Israel, quote, will not last long and, quote, will never defeat Hamas and Hezbollah. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei making the comments Friday with a rifle by his side, urging nations from Afghanistan to Yemen and from Iran to Gaza to be ready to attack Israel. The supreme leader also praising the October 7th massacre by Hamas terrorists in southern Israel, adding that Iran-backed armed groups in the Middle East will not back down despite Israel taking out terrorist leadership from both Hezbollah and Hamas. A lot to discuss here, as always, so I do want to bring in Enia Krivine, the Senior Director of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies Israel Program and National Security Network. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us, as always, today.
Thank you so much for having me, Josh.
All right, so first I do have to ask you about that post we were just looking at from the Israel Defense Forces, as they do say 250 Hezbollah operatives killed there over the course of just 4 days. What do you make of that? Because that does sound like a very significant number.
The IDF has made some stunning accomplishments in just a short amount of time, and 250 Hezbollah fighters in 4 days is a good number. But as you know, his IDF has successfully taken hundreds of Hezbollah fighters off of the chess table since the war began, and these are Hezbollah numbers. And that doesn't even take into account the Beeper operation, which took another 1,000 plus out of the game, whether it killed them or just took them off the battlefield due to wounding them. Another stunning feat. But we have to remember that Hezbollah is a huge fighting force. They have at least 20,000 to 25,000 fighters. They've got another 10 or more thousand fighters in the reserves. This is a big force with a formidable arsenal. They were said to have at least 150,000 rockets before the war started. We know that their resources have been degraded by IDF fire, but by all counts, they have at least tens of thousands of rockets, missiles, and drones left. So while these are impressive, decisive accomplishments by the IDF is still taking the threat very seriously and should do.
All right, I do want to show some of the video here from just the other day. This is Tuesday, as we do know that Iran launched that major attack on Israel. There are 181 ballistic missiles. And I want to talk about the potential retaliation, because it does sound as though Israel has said that is going to happen. We are going to retaliate against Iran for this attack. So my question for you is, when do we expect that to happen, and how big of an action is it likely to be?
So judging by what the U.S. and Israelis are saying, it sounds like it's going to retaliate, and I hope that it doesn't wait too long, because it seems like the conditions are right. Right after the attack, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said that the U.S. would work with Israel to make sure that Iran paid severe consequences for this massive ballistic missile attack. And since then, Biden has said that he strongly supports Israel. I will say that Biden has hedged, and he has come out publicly and said that Israel should not strike Iran's oil infrastructure or its nuclear sites. And I would say that this is a blunder. I don't see why the U.S. needs to go out publicly and take targets off the table. But generally speaking, the response has been good. The response has been strong from Washington. And one last thing I'll say on this is that you'll remember that this is the second massive attack from Iran. The last one was in April. And after the April attack, Biden came out and he said, take the win. In other words, he told Israel to stand down and cautioned Israel against any retaliation. The situation is very different this time around, probably for a whole host of reasons. And this time, the U.S. has said that it's working with Israel in order to plan whatever response Israel delivers. And it behooves the administration to do so, because by staying in the game with Israel, by keeping Israel on side, it also manages to maintain some leverage going into this Israeli response. So I would, I give the administration high marks for changing into a better set of talking points after this attack, but I still wish they wouldn't just take potential targets off the table in public, as Biden has done in the past few days.
I want to dig a little bit deeper into that possible retaliation, because we heard from Biden. He said, of course, that he does oppose targeting Iran's nuclear sites. We talked a little bit about this, but as far as the oil, the nuclear sites, is it likely that if Israel was to attack Iran's nuclear sites, oil, would that potentially cause everything to escalate even further? Because there are all these fears out there of an escalation, and it seems more and more likely with each day that does pass.
So there's been a steady escalation for over a year, or almost a year. I mean, we're coming up on the 365 days of this war. And there's been several rounds of ongoing diplomacy between Israel and Hamas, with the U.S., between the U.S. and Hezbollah in Lebanon. And there's been this constant drumbeat of trying to change the scenario through diplomacy, and it just hasn't worked. Almost a year in, and there's really very little diplomatic wins to show for all of these efforts. So I do think that an escalation is inevitable, and sometimes you need that to change the chessboard. Iran has had a very strong strategy over the past decade plus of funding, training, and equipping Iran-backed militias throughout the region to try and strangle Israel. Israel's former Prime Minister Naftali Bennett called it the octopus doctrine, whereby you have the head of the octopus in Tehran and all of the arms of the octopus in the region attacking Israel. And Israel's largely been in a defensive posture for at least throughout this war and many years before that. So I think what October 7th taught Israel is that it cannot sit by while dozens of Iran-backed militias, dozens of terrorist organizations that are funded, trained, and equipped by Tehran just build up on its borders. And it's decided to go on the offensive. It is taking the fight to the head of the octopus in Tehran, and ultimately a decisive blow to the head of the octopus in Iran will be good for Israel, good for the U.S. allies in the region, and good for the U.S.-led order in the Middle East.
Just a few minutes ago here, I talked about those comments that were made by Iran's supreme leader, and I want to read back some of them here, because he did say that Israel, quote, will not last long and will never defeat Hamas or Hezbollah. What do you make of that statement? He also urged several nations to essentially attack Israel. So what do you make of all of that?
So the Ayatollah's had a very bad few weeks. I mean, going back to when Israel changed its war strategy to focus on the north, it had the Beeper attack. The Hezbollah has been largely decapitated. Meanwhile, Hamas has been mostly defeated in Gaza. It remains a terror threat, but it's not the military it was on October 7th. The Houthis have been dealt significant blows. And all of this, Josh, all of this is Iranian investment that we've seen just go up in smoke after IDF attacks. This is billions and billions of dollars in Iranian investment in weapons and manpower and capabilities that Israel seems to have pretty much destroyed, or at least dealt a very significant blow in a matter of weeks. So Iran is not having a great couple of weeks right now, and the regime in Tehran is definitely on its back foot and is definitely concerned. And having the U.S. now saying that it supports Israel and it is going to work with Israel to make sure that Iran pays a price, that is a very big change of events that I'm sure the Ayatollah is still trying to digest. But I will say, as far as when it comes to calling up all of these nations in the region, this is not the Middle East of 1967, of the Six-Day War, or even the Middle East of the Yom Kippur War. This is a region now where the U.S. have been heavily invested for over 2 decades. This is a region where most of the countries either have peace with Israel or are moving towards a peaceful relationship with Israel, moving towards normalization. And what you see in Tehran is a regime that has now sent out its proxies into the region to try and attempt to destroy Israel, to destroy US allied countries, and gobbling up the Middle East. So he can, he's calling out not to nations, he's calling out to Iran-backed militias throughout the region that have been destroying and destabilizing US allies in the region for more than a decade. And all of these US allies, regional allies of the Western order will benefit from a decisive blow to the head of the octopus in Tehran.
We know that sadly 2 IDF soldiers were killed when a drone essentially was fired from Iraq over to an army base that was there in northern Golan Heights. Are we seeing a lot of these attacks that are happening from places like Iraq? Because a lot of people will think of Iran and, I don't know, maybe Egypt or something of that nature, but you don't hear a lot about Iraq being involved location-wise. So is that something that we are seeing more of?
I agree with you 100%, Josh. We don't hear enough about Iraq. We don't hear enough about the Shiite militias in Iraq and Syria that are backed by Iran and that continue this trend of destabilization. The forces that sent that drone that killed the Israeli soldiers, these type of militias have been attacking Israel for the past year. They are intermittent strikes. And they're the same people that are attacking US forces in the region. This is the same ideology. These are the same militias. So it just goes to show that the US interest in the region, that Israel is fighting alongside with the principles of the US for the US-led regional order that includes the moderate Arab states that are struggling to fend off these same proxies, these same Iran-backed Islamist proxies that are gobbling up the region. And Israel stands on the side of the moderate Arab regimes of the US and ultimately on the side of stability and prosperity for the region.
And my last question here before I let you go, because obviously, as I mentioned, there is a lot to discuss here, but we did hear that Hamas's or maybe Gaza's what you would call the de facto prime minister has been killed by the IDF. They confirmed that, but I've talked to a lot of people in the area. I had to look over at my notes because a lot of people were telling me that they didn't really know this name. It was not somebody that they were familiar with. Is that the case? And is it still significant if it's somebody that most people aren't aware of?
So this guy, Mustafa, was a Hamas leader. He spent years in jail with Yahya Sinwar. You don't hear about him because he was the leader of their government, right? Hamas liked to put on this show as if there was some division between the military and the government. But what we know from the past year is that there was very little, if any, delineation between all of the services in Gaza. It was all dominated by Hamas. Hamas pervaded every aspect of life in Gaza. This guy, Mustafa, yeah, sure, he was the head of the government, but he was also involved in force posture in Gaza. And he was also involved on the internal mechanisms that crack down on Palestinians for Hamas. So again, very little line between Hamas and any of the other functions of government. We also know that Hamas had completely pervaded not only the healthcare, not only the education, the school teachers for Hamas, but also the humanitarian organizations and journalists have all come out to have been acting on the one hand as a journalist, on the other hand, as a Hamas fighter. And that is true throughout the whole system. So I'm not surprised that not that many people have heard of him. I'm also not surprised that he wore 2 hats. And unfortunately, that is what happened when you have a terrorist regime that rules an enclave like Gaza for almost 2 decades without any competition from within, without any sort of other voices coming up to challenge the terror regime.
All right. Enia Krivine, as always, thank you so much for taking the time to join us and talk about all of the developments. I mean, we can only get to a few of them because so much is happening here. Is there anything else that you want to add before I let you go?
No, I mean, I'll just add, Josh, that we'll stay in touch because I think the next couple of weeks are going to be consequential. I hope that Israel takes advantage of this support from the U.S. and is able to deal a blow to the regime in Tehran in response to this ballistic missile attack. hope that Israel does not wait too long, and I hope that the US will come alongside Israel and make sure that whatever the response is, that it is able to take the temperature in the region down and does not lead into an escalation where Iran feels emboldened to take this to the next level.
All right. Enia Krivine there with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, a definite friend of the show. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Josh.